Good morning, everyone.
I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Hi, Anita. Our story begins a little while back when a mutual friend of ours, a literary agent, Brian Cook, over lunch said to me, I've got this great manuscript. I don't know what to do with it. It's really quite amazing. You should publish this book. And as Patrick would know, when a colleague says that, you actually have to do something about it because generally they're pretty well right. So I read this manuscript and spent most of my time crying, and if not crying, laughing. And it needed a little bit of work. So I said to Brian, I'd love to meet Anita. So he said, I'll meet you at Mingaletta. And I thought, Mingaletta, that's that blue place down at Umina Beach that we drive past. And as I walked in, and I thought, I'm in this amazing place, and here is this extraordinary woman, Dianne O'Brien. And we hit it off pretty instantly, didn't we? And I said, I really want to publish your book. And she said, I really want you to. My story needs to be told. And so here we are today, which is rather exciting. So I just want to read a little bit of the book to start with because it sets the tone for what is quite a remarkable story. Excuse me. Growing up, it seemed like we had a good life. I had a wonderful mother who loved me, a dad who took me fishing, an older half-brother who looked out for me, and lots of mates. Mum was the centre of my world and taught me everything I needed to know, and then some. Everyone loved her, and in turn she helped me understand how important it was to care for others. As a family, we weren't rich, but we weren't dirt poor either. Mum worked hard all her life on farms, and Dad earned a decent living as a truckie and a bootmaker. Later on, I discovered nearly everything had been a lie, and my world crumbled. My mother wasn't my mother, my father wasn't my father. My half-brother was absolutely no relation to me. I wasn't Irish-Australian like my parents. My name wasn't even Dianne Westman. I was actually Aboriginal and part of the stolen generation. I was the daughter of the river country, and as everyone who knows just a small part of my story, it's a miracle I'm still alive today. So, Annie Di, you loved your mother an enormous amount. She taught you everything.
Yeah, I had my mother on, well, like most people, I had my mother on a pedestal, and I thought the world of her, and I call her my real mother, as in the book. I did find my real mother, but to me, my real mother is the lady that brought me up and stayed with me when I was sick, and taught me everything about emotions and respect, all the good stuff that we got taught when we were young.
And she was instrumental in making you proud of who you were and gave you a lot of courage because you grew up in a fairly rough and tumble area of Granville.
Yeah.
Tell us what that was like in those days.
Well, I thought at first it was great. I went to a Catholic school in Trongate, and then Mum must have not been able to pay the fees. I was pretty wild because the nun called Mum up and said that she had to pay the school fees and Mum didn't have the money. And I was in the playground and I seen my mother go home and she was crying. And I thought, I wonder what that nun said. Anyway, I went. I found out what she said, so I tipped the garbage bin over in the playground and set the lawn on fire. So nothing I wouldn't do for my mother. She was a real true blue, Aussie. She helped people. She never turned anyone away from the door if they needed food. We had gypsies living in Granville. Mum used to always, I seen her go and get a shirt out of the cupboard of Dad's and give this old fella a shirt. And I said, Mum, you just give Dad's shirt away. And he said, he doesn't need it like this fella does.
But she taught you about being generous and
being kind. She taught me respect, and to help other people.
But you were pretty naughty.
Yeah, I was a naughty kid.
There was that incident when you decided to go into the city to go and see someone because you loved dancing and you loved music.
Oh, we had Johnny O'Keefe, Sister Rock, and I happened to be watching TV on YouTube, and 1959, his Johnny O'Keefe film, and I seen myself there, and I thought, oh my God, that's how Mum knew I was at that show. Because when I got home, Mum said, where have you been? I said, oh, I just found my friend's place. And she said, no, you were supposed to sleep at somebody's house. And I said, yeah, I was. And she said, no, you weren't. Now get in your room and stop telling lies. You know I don't like lies. And I said, how do you know? And she said, oh, a little bird told me. So this is like, I'm 13, and this I seen when I'm 75 on TV. Johnny O'Keefe, and I'm swinging in front of the rock and rolling in front of the cameras.
With this very long plush that you couldn't mistake her.
Yeah, I had a ponytail, but I was the only one that had this white flower thing holding my hair up. Everyone else had just a sort of band on their hair, but mine had to be fancy. So she picked me up.
But very sadly, when you were 14, your mother was ill.
Yes, Mum had a heart of a 69-year-old lady. She was only 54. She worked hard on work farms in parks and that, and she had a hard life. So she took to bed for 4 years, and then when she passed, she was sitting on the veranda, and she said, oh, did I take my tablets? And I said, I don't think so. So she said, go and get them, because I feel a bit funny. So I went in to get them, and she collapsed on the veranda, and I pulled her into the hall and yelling at Dad, but he's watching it. Bob Dyer pick a box. And he said, just a minute, and I'm screaming, Mum's falling over, come and get her quick. And he never, and he eventually got her when I was near her bedroom door, picked her up and put her in her bed. And then I lost her.
And then she died. And from that point, Annie Dye, your life turned from a very happy childhood to an incredibly difficult, abusive life. Your dad became a monster. Tell us what your dad did.
Well, after Mum died, I've got to get my breath. After she passed, Dad started going around looking for other women. So we used to drive into Sydney to really flash houses. I've never seen so many flash houses. And he'd go in and say, oh, this is going to be your new mother. And anyway, he introduced us. And we'd go from one house 1 week, another house another week. And then Dad started getting real cranky with me to do all the housework. And my godmother come down to get me from Parks. And he was arguing with her, no, she's staying here. No one can cook or clean, and she can do the cooking and cleaning. But she's only 14, so she needs to, you can't have her in the house on your own. And he said, yes, I can, and I'm going to get another mother. So
he was a bit of a playboy? He was.
Yeah, Dad was, yeah. And so he started leaving me alone in the house and going out with these women. And then that's when a lot of trouble started happening. People knew I was on my own in the house, and you're not supposed to leave a 14-year-old on their own.
So there were a couple of nights where it got really frightening for you when those young boys came around?
Yeah, so a couple of my so-called friends knew that I was on my own in the house. So there was about 5 boys come to the house one night, banging to let them in. We're going to rape you, we're going to bash you, we're going to do this. I thought they were going to kill me. And to me, that was the horrible night. So I got in the kitchen and hid there, but I had a nosy neighbour, which thank God she was. She rang the police straight away. So when they heard the sirens, they took off. But I really thought they were going to come through the window. They were smashing on the window. But Dad had grill things on the thing, so that protected us.
But you also had some really close friends, and some of those boys taught you actually how to fight. The Harrison boys.
The Harrison boys. Yeah, well, I got assaulted walking home from the picture show one night, and so I used to hang around with these Harrison kids, and they were boxers, and so I asked for them to teach me to fight, and it's unusual in them days for a girl to fight, but I wore jeans and t-shirts, so I didn't care. So a lot of that protected me in the long run, but I was still green in the mind, so I still had an innocent mind. And when I've read some of the stuff I wrote, I think, how stupid was I? But it was because now I realise Mum never told me much about the facts of life, but if you remember them days, we weren't told stuff, we were seen and not heard. Don't talk about things in front of the kids. So I didn't know a lot.
No. And that kind of violence that was around you really came to the fore one night when you were home and your father had introduced a man called Colin into your life.
Yes. So Dad wanted to go away with this lady, and he said he'll be going away for holidays. So I said, oh, that's good, can I come? And he said, no, you'll be staying home. I've got a guy down the back that's living in the caravan. You will stay here and do the cooking and that. Just don't let him in the house, take the food down to him, and yeah, you'll be right. So away Dad went, and the first couple of days was fine because I used to get a taxi and go up to this other lady's house and sleep, and then come back the next day and clean the house, cook some meals, and then take them down, leave them near the caravan. But this night was raining and the taxi was late, and then I heard it click on the front gate, and it was, well, when our gate used to click, someone was coming through it. So I heard the gate click, so I went out, and here's Colin laying on the front veranda. He looked like he was out cold. So I pushed, because he was drunk, I pulled him into the hallway, and then I went to ring up the taxi, and he hit me on the back of the head with something, and then, yeah, I went down, was raped, and it was a brutal rape. And then I ran next door to my nosy neighbour, who was awake, and I ran screaming to her house, that's what he'd done. And he's running behind saying, oh, she's mad, she made it up, I didn't rape her, I didn't do nothing, but I was all blood everywhere. And Mrs. Cliff said, well, you're the one that's mad, look at her. And so she rang the police straight away. And that is the last time I really seen my home.
Yeah.
Because then the welfare came and got me the next day.
Yeah. And in those days, the blame was always put on the young person, the victim.
Yes.
And from there, you found out you were pregnant.
Yes.
And you became a ward of the state.
Yeah.
Because your father didn't want you.
Yeah. We went to court at Parramatta Court, and Dad, the judge said what had happened to me, and then Dad got up and said, well, I want to disown my daughter. And the judge said, well, you can't disown an adopted daughter, an adopted child. So with that, I realised then I was adopted. So I was sort of, while the judge was talking, I was taking 3 steps back to the front side door because my intention was to run away. But I didn't get far. Policeman grabbed me as I went out the door. Anyway, I got locked up in Parramatta Girls' Home. They took me down to Glebe Shelter. And Glebe Shelter then found out I was pregnant. This is like 2 months later. And yeah, then I was sentenced to Parramatta Girls' Home.
And extraordinary that you were the one that had to go to the home.
Yes.
So you lost everything.
Yeah, I lost my brother, I lost my home,
Your family.
my dog,
Yeah.
and all my Elvis collection. Dad burnt everything.
He was
killed
cruel.
my dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the time at Parramatta Girls' Home, a lot of us know about what happened in that terrible, terrible place, but you saw a lot of that violence and abuse.
Yes.
And you were pregnant.
Yes. We were locked in a room actually as big as this, and there was like 30 girls locked in this room all day. We'd go in there for breakfast, dinner and tea. And the breakfast used to be weasels weasels in our porridge. Sorry, porridge with weasels in it. And rhubarb custard, which I never ate again. Then we would be let out to go to the toilet. Well, the cells would, like this, imagine this room, and the cells are opposite, and there's 2 cells there, and then there's upstairs where we went to the dormitory. But the dormitory, we were on mattresses that thin, like you'd get when you're in prison, you know, the little mattresses. So we were locked in this room all the time, had this awful food. Girls were cutting up. We had little wireless that everyone used to fight over, different channels to UE and all that. And the mental health girls were locked in 2 cells. So of a night, I used to listen to stories that the biggest girls from the big house, we called that the big house. So the bigger girls were over there, and they were the girls that were getting raped. And if you read in the paper and that about the Parramatta Girls' Home, there was a lot of kids getting raped and stuff in there. I got smacked around by an officer who put me in the dungeon, and the dungeons are really black. In fact, when the Parramatta Girls' Home was closing down, and it became Norma Parker, but when it was closing down altogether, we went down there and I took a couple of my grandkids with me, and I told them to get into this hole. And they said, it's too black. And I said, well, get in there and just have a look if you see anything. And my granddaughter got in and she said, I can't even see you. Anyway, I said, that's where I was locked up when I got into trouble. And we had a floor like this, as big as this, and it was wood, and we used to have to scrub that with a scrub brush and rag. And then if we got into trouble, there was a big cement slab as long as this hall, half this hall, and we used to have to clean that with the toothbrush. So there was a man called Mr. Greenway, and I can say his name now because he's been in jail. I think he might have passed.
I think he died, yeah.
And Matron, but Matron was okay. And Mr. Greenway, so I got called up. Mr. Greenway used to interview with girls, and some officers raped girls in there, and we'd hear the stories because we were in a separate on remand, and then this was a big wall, and that was the big girls. So that was the main Parramatta Girls' Home. So we'd hear stories from these girls when we used to go over for lunch and that, when we come from that over there. So you get remand and then you get transferred over to the big house. And then they'd tell us stories. And so when I got into trouble, the officer hit me in the face with the keys, and then he took me to the dungeon. So in the dungeons, you just threw me in, and all you could hear the rats running around, but you couldn't see anything. It was just like you were blind. There was nothing. And then we stayed there for a couple of days till we woke up to ourselves. And the showers were in the dungeons, and the dungeons are underneath the big house. And the showers had no doors, the toilets had no doors. So then the officers would line us up in a row, and then we'd have to come up to them, open our towels, turn around, and the excuse was they're looking for tattoos. But we were young, we were kids, we'd just done as we were told. But as I grew up, I realised what they were doing. And another thing is, when we were down here in the dungeons, there'd be a window up there, and the garden was there outside. So the garden was, there was a gardener who used to look down at the girls that were in the showers.
Yeah.
So I just did an interview yesterday, and one lady in the audience said, I often wondered where these men come from, because somebody said, oh, there was never any men officers. And I said, well, what were they? Welfare officers. And this lady got up and said, you know, they could have been officers from the Parramatta jail, because she and her community were playing sports. And every time the girls went over to get changed in the changing area, the officers would be on the wall at the Parramatta jail looking down at them. So that would have been a problem straight away. But she said, yeah, every time they looked up, the officers were looking down at them getting dressed.
And there was no one really to protect the girls?
No, there was no one to protect us. You even were told to shut up or you get longer. And there was girls in there, like I seen this girl from South Australia. She was there for 6 months just stealing a pair of socks.
Yeah.
And she got bashed and she was raped. And I've spoke to girls that were just pulled out of bed from the dormitory and been raped.
And you eventually, your time came to have your baby. So then
Yes.
you had to leave, which was...
So it was funny though, because when I was 5 months pregnant, they sent me down to St Anthony's, which is a convent for women that don't want their children. And but these women are all 30 and 35. But to me, being 14, I was thinking, well, I was 15 when I got in. I thought they were old people. And so when I walked in, I said, oh, this is a home for old people. and they said, are you getting rid of your baby? And I said, no, I'm not. And then they were ladies that were giving their babies up and stuff. So Dad visited me there 12 months after Mum passed, and he come to tell me that it was her anniversary. And he said, when you get rid of the kid, you can go to your brother's, but you're not coming home. And I said, fair enough, I'm not getting rid of no kids, so see you later.
So then he pretty much disowned you
Yeah.
again.
Yes.
So you went to, your time came and you were in Crown Street Hospital where you were going to have your baby.
Yeah.
And they gave you an ultimatum. Well, they didn't give you
Yeah,
one.
matron, then I got transferred. Well, after that one, at St Anthony's, I went to the laundry, jumped the fence and went back down Parramatta. I was on the run for a little while, only a week, but I kept putting a belt across him so no one could see I was pregnant. And then I had a boyfriend long ago. His mother, I went to her straight away and she rang up Parramatta and told them to come and get me, that she's homeless, and she just jumped the fence at Parramatta.
Because she didn't want you to be with her son.
Yeah, I didn't want to stay there because I was getting picked at about being a Parramatta girls' home, and they were all older than me.
Yeah.
So then from there, then they sent me to Myee in Tempe, and that was a home for kids that were fostered out, adopted out, abused kids, kids that had disabilities. And we had to try and get these kids walking so they could go to Broughton Hill home. And they only took these disability kids if they were walking. So if they didn't walk, I don't know what happened to the others.
So this was before you actually had the baby?
Yeah, I was
to
in
work
this
at
home.
this
Yeah. So I was in this home till time for baby. And then when I was due, the matron said to me, now, what are you going to do with the child because you're going to take her? And I said, no, I'm keeping my baby. And she said, well, how are you going to do that? So I had a choice. I had to go to French's Forest till baby was 5 years old and stay at Myee, or I had the choice of marrying the rapist. If I married the rapist, I could keep my baby, and matron said, and then when you come up 18 or 19, you can run away. And I said, well, I'm still under welfare. And she said, no, you won't be under welfare. The day you turn 18, you won't be under welfare. So that would be my choice, she said. I would go there, stay there until you're of age, and then take off. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that, because where am I going to go? And then she said, well, you're going to lose your child. So when we went to Crown Street, when the day of Deb's birth, we already got warned that when these people come around, they're going to put a pillow on your chest and they're going to tell you to sign a paper that is anaesthetic, but don't sign it because they're adoption papers. So I was already G'd up before I even got there. So I said to them when I was in labour, I don't want people coming and watching me have my baby, because they had university people there. And anyway, it did happen, and I didn't give a damn then. So they did the pillar thing, and I kicked it off, and I said, no, I'm keeping my baby. No, you're only 15. And I said, no, I'm keeping my baby. And so I got sent back to Myee, and the matron got in touch with Mrs O'Brien in Covart. And
so Mrs O'Brien is Colin's mother.
Yeah.
The rapist.
Because he went to jail, but he got out a couple of weeks or something before. Anyhow, Mrs. O'Brien and Mr. O'Brien come down to see Deb, and they said, oh, we want you to come home to us and we'll help you and look after the baby. And so what are you going to do? You got no family, you got nowhere to go, so this is the best choice. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to get married. And they said, well, you have to get married to keep the baby. So that was what was pumped into me all the time, that I had to marry this bloke. So
Honey, why was it so important for you to keep your baby?
Well,
what was it?
She was my mum. My mum's spirit to me had come back. So, and I know it was a shock and everything, but to me, that baby was mum. And when I found out it was a girl, I thought it's her spirit has come back.
So the better option you saw was to be with this family that at least could give you and Debbie some shelter?
Yes.
And hopefully Colin would be out of
Well, he
the
was a
way.
shearer, so he was never in town, and when he was in town, he used to just flog us. So, and I couldn't understand why Mr. and Mrs. O'Brien didn't stick up for me, but then as I've got older, they were old people. So I realised that they couldn't stick up for me anyway, because he would have he hit them, and I seen him do that to his father. He busted his father's eardrums. So I never expected them then to, to stick up for me, because when he was flogging me, I used to think, they can hear this, why aren't they coming out here helping me? But now I realise, they
And he
were
did
too
that
old.
quite regularly.
Oh yeah,
hit
all the
you.
time, even when he wanted sex.
Yes. So going forward a bit, you were in that relationship for how many years?
Only not long, because I took off. I took off while I was there a couple of months, and then I was homeless in the street.
With Debbie?
Yeah, with Deb. And then I went to my boyfriend's mum's, but he was in a boys' home. And then he said...
This is back in Granville?
Yeah. So we're back in Granville. So I went to Mrs. Morris's house, and I said, can I stay here for a while because I've got Deb? And she said, yeah, but as soon as Keith come out of the home, you have to go, because me and Keith weren't allowed to be under the same roof.
Because you were underage?
Yeah, because we're underage. And Keith already got up and said that it was his child, so we could keep the baby. And Mrs. Morris said, yeah, but he'll go for common knowledge. Yeah. So that wasn't a very good plan. So what had happened, I was homeless, so there was an old tip in Granville. It wasn't really a tip, it was a place where boys used to knock off cars and leave them down the river, dump cars everywhere. So it was a big Chevy, and how big the back seat is, an old Chevy. I pulled this old wooden pram with me and Debbie, and we slept in that for a couple of nights because we couldn't sleep anywhere, because my uncles were bookmakers. So they had raids on their homes all the time, so they didn't want to take me in because they knew that if the police come, then it's back. I've lost Deb. So this went on for about a month, and then I had enough, and then I rang up my sister-in-law and said, I think you better send me some money and I'll come back home, and she told me to get home because you're going to lose her if you're in the street. So I got the train and went straight back.
And you stayed there for a little bit longer, and then you
to my
decided...
second child.
Yes.
And then I took off when Linda was 1, and I went back to see my sister-in-law, but she's passed now, so there's no reason to go back.
So you came back to Sydney, you have 2 little kids, you took up with someone else.
Raped again.
You got raped again. And this story is so remarkable. So we're not going to sort of get into a whole little bitty stuff, because there's so much
It's
that's
so
there.
much how green I was and trustworthy.
And you trusted a lot of people, and you had a lot of violence in your life, and you chose very poorly with some of your male friends. But then you ended up out west in Mount Druitt with 5 kids, 6 kids at that stage from various dads. But you had a home, you had a shelter.
Yes, I always said to Deb, when you turn 5, we're going to stop moving. We're going to get a house and we will stay in that house. So she was about 7 when we got the house in Mount Druitt, and we never left.
So you had 6 kids under 7?
Yeah.
And how old were you?
I think 20-something, 29.
Wow. So that's quite well.
Might have been more. Well, I had, on my 21st, I had I have 4 children. Yeah.
Wow.
My 21st was my 4th kid.
Gosh. But you had a loving home. You had kids everywhere.
Yeah.
You had a roof over your head, and you felt though that the police were really intimidating you and your kids, and that there was a lot of corruption out of the police force there.
Oh, yeah.
And then one night you had a party.
Yes.
What happened that night? Who died?
Well, the police had been tormenting the boys. I had boys who were 14 and 15 and used to ride their motorbikes down the river, them dirt bikes. And they make a lot of noise. So neighbours were complaining about all the kids, from Mount Druitt going down the creek. But my 2 used to cop it all the time. So this night we were having my son's 21st. And this old fella come in with a chain and a baseball bat, and my Philip just got his car painted with that real glittery paint, and it was a race car. So he went to smash it with this chain and a baseball bat, and a lady laid across the car and said, "No, don't touch this car, it's just been painted." And then the boys seen her lay down and him with the chain and the baseball bat, and they thought that he was attacking her. So they, like a football was, a football game, they tackled him, down he went, and then someone yelled out to me that the kids were fighting. So I come outside and I seen all this, and I picked up a bit of a steel pipe thing to hit my boy and to get off this man. And anyway, so what had happened, the man got assaulted, and a neighbour rang up and said that me and my boys bashed this man. So when we went to court, I just didn't believe the story I heard. And what they said was I picked up half a side of a trampoline and this hand, I just got out of hospital, this hand was cut by one of my blokes. He cut me with a knife, and that was like it's still in plaster. And you know how something comes out of plaster the next day, you still can't move it around like you should. And they reckon I picked this thing up and went over my head, and I hit everybody, with this half-side trampoline. And I said to the solicitor, are they going to believe that? That's bloody unreal. And he said, well, I think you better go over. And I didn't drink then. I stopped drinking for 8 years. And I said, he said to me, I think you better go over and get a stiff scotch. And I said, why? And he said, I think you're going to go under. And I said, fair dinkum, and people believe that story. Anyway, I did. I went for 12 months. But in that 12 months, I worked with the drug and alcohol counsellor. I got glasses for the girls in jail. So you
started becoming an activist.
Yeah, I was already an activist.
Yeah, we'll go back to that. You're in jail. You started making.
So I did stuff. Yeah, I made stuff. So we went to the high courts in Sydney, and the judge the 3 judges decided that it was a corrupt case, and they've never seen one like it from the Mount Druitt police.
But they gave you a criminal record.
Yeah, I still got a criminal record.
You still have a criminal record. And I just want to there's so many parts to this story.
Yeah.
So that kind of created where you're heading to now. So we'll just pass that for a moment.
Yes.
But in between that time of when you had the babies when they were young and when you ended up in jail, you found out your true heritage. So what happened? How did you find out eventually that, because for a long time you thought you might be part Italian or part...
That was in Mount Druitt when the kids went to school. There was a guy called Donnie Williams, and he was one of the Aboriginal liaison people. And he said, I've got some checks here, it's called Austudy. So Austudy was for shoes and socks, and it was $3 a fortnight. So I said I wouldn't take it because we're not black. And he looked at me and he said, are you kidding? And I said, no, there's no proof that we're Aboriginal. We could be Italian, Spanish, Gypsy, whatever, everything except Aboriginal. And I should have known better because I had a lot of Aboriginal friends, but I just didn't have proof. And if you live in an Aboriginal community, there's a thing called Aboriginal confirmation. And we're the only race in Australia that has to prove, or in the world, where we have to prove we're black. So I didn't have enough evidence to say, yeah, we were Aboriginal. Anyhow, he said, well, if I go away and find out you're Aboriginal, will you take the money? And I said, oh, of course I will. You know, I'll buy the socks and shoes for the kids. And it was in 12 months he got a hold of Peter Reid and Coral Edwards, who founded Aboriginal Link Up, who find out families. And it turned out that I was William Cooper, William Cooper's great-granddaughter. And I'm getting me goosebumps. He's a great activist. You've just got to Google his name and see what the work that he did.
The book's just been published quite recently.
Yeah, there's two. They published two. So the man come back and he said, well, you're coming from good DNA, you're coming from pure blood. And I said, why? He said, your great-grandfather was William Cooper, this great activist who helped the Jews over in their land. So then I say, yeah, we're Aboriginal. Okay. He said, well, will you take the cheques? I said, okay. So I went to the bank, cashed all those cheques, and it was over $1,000. Well, I thought I was doing something wrong. I was starting to shake. I said, oh, what am I going to do with $1,000? So we got kids' uniforms, books, socks, everything. So that was the start of it. So Peter Reid then started digging in deeper, finding my great auntie Sally, and then I went back to the mission and lived there for 9.5 years.
So let's just go back a bit. So you found your birth mother.
Yes.
So in all that, when you found out you were Aboriginal and that you started looking deeper and deeper, you went and found your birth records in the parks.
Yeah.
I know the parks in
Wagga Wagga.
Wagga Wagga. And so you then started searching for your birth mum. Tell us what that was like to find.
Yeah, well, I searched for her, but Link Up found her, and she actually lived, if anyone knows Granville, I lived in Redfern Street, and a block back is Nelson Street, and she moved into that Nelson Street when I actually got put in Parramatta Girls' Home. So I don't believe in coincidence, so I thought, people are saying, that's a coincidence, isn't it? And I used to play in the park opposite her house.
With your... And you had lots of sisters.
Yeah. I always said to Mum, Val, I think I got 5 sisters somewhere, because I used to daydream and that. And then she said, oh, don't be stupid, you haven't got no sisters, wear it, you've got a stepbrother, my brother, not a stepbrother, got a brother, and me. You're an only child. Well, it turned out I did have 5 sisters, and they all didn't recognise us being Aboriginal. I don't think Mum did either, because she married my real mother. She married a man called Mr. Smith, who was Artie Beetson's friend and whatever. Not Artie Beetson, that so-called godfather.
Oh, yes. But I
Yeah.
can't remember his name either. But
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that you said to me that you wanted to have a big family, because you felt that you had missed out on that.
Yes.
On that amazing relationships that you really so desperately wanted.
Yeah.
But your birth mother didn't bring you into the fold like you wanted.
Yeah, that's right, because she didn't tell the sisters that I existed. 15 years later, I was at a Bob Carr dinner, and the lady opposite me said, oh, do you remind me of my auntie? And I said, who's your auntie? And she said, Jenny Willis-Croft. And I said, well, that's my sister. Well, she almost fell off the chair. And she said, oh, well, I'm going to ring Auntie Esme up, which is her favourite auntie, and say something about this. Anyway, she rang my real mother up, and my real mother goes, oh, no, that must be a drunken lady or something. I don't know that woman, really. This is like... Oh, anyway, the funny thing about that story is that she actually went back to her mother, this girl, went back to her mother, and she told her the story, and her mother turned around and said, oh, that's Dianne, that's your father's other daughter. And that's coming from...
So they kept you a secret.
Yeah, so it was still a secret.
So there's all these wonderful things in the book that, it'll all come together when you read it, because there's so many bits of the puzzle.
You have to read it to follow it.
It's sort of a little bit all over the place. But where I'm going to with this is then you really embraced your Aboriginality, and you decided to do more for the Aboriginal community, and when you came out of jail, you had educated yourself to become an alcohol and drug counsellor, having had alcohol issues yourself. Yes. Having that education, what did that do to your life?
Well, really, not so much the education, the way people are. You know, like, I had a good mentor when I got legal service. I worked from a cleaner to a director, from a director to a CEO. And that's only because of how I said in the book, Tony Nesbitt, because I mentored her, and her daughter come into the pub and said to me, "Oh, I want you to be my drug and alcohol counsellor." And I was almost having a drink, and I went, "What? What are you talking about? I'm a drunk." And she said, "That's why I want you, because you walk the walk, you talk the talk, and that's it. And people respect you still." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to take that on." And I never drank again then for 8 years. Because somebody had faith and they handed me that chance. And that's what I tell my clients today. You don't need, you do need someone to give you strength, but it's within you. You know, you've got to try. People can help you, but it's up to yourself. You know, there's so many services out there for people now that they can get help. And when I become a drug and alcohol counsellor, some of my clients were people I drank with, like the fella I took to court. And I said, "When was the first time you took a drink?" "You know, when you was drinking." So I don't say that to the judge. So it was an education pathway, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was Tony Nesbitt, was that the lady that gave you the dress? And that's fabulous. Tell the story about the dress. It's one of my favourite stories.
So I started to work with legal service, and then I was sort of Tony Nesbitt's bodyguard, I'd say. And well, that's what you would call it. And anyway, so she was mentoring me and teaching me how to talk properly and all that. Anyhow, we had to serve summonses, and Tony brought me this bloody nice dress it was. Now it looks like just a rag dress to anybody, but it was a really nice dress and had the pockets on the side and it was straight in like that, and it was a really nice dress. Anyway, we had to go and deliver this summons, and this big Aboriginal bloke come out, and then his wife, he come out that side of the car, and his wild woman was coming out this side. And I said, "Oh, she wants to fight you." And she said, "Oh, what am I going to do?" And I said, "Hang on." And I got out of the car and took my dress off. So I had to fight this woman. I wasn't going to rip my dress. And I looked back at that dress and it was only $30. But then we were cool.
Your friend said, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to get this bloody dress ripped." Anyway, we didn't have a fight. The man hurried up and took the summons and the lady
You've
away.
had such a colourful, extraordinary life, guys. There's some wonderful stories in the book. There's also, you worked with Charlie Perkins. You did a lot of work.
That was breaking into. When I became grandmother of the year, the lady, I said, "Oh, dear, it's good walking in the front door." And the lady said, "Boy, what happened?" And I said, "Oh, when we were doing some activism, what's her name? The judge. We were marching with Charlie Perkins, and he told me to jump the fence and go. There were a couple of the Queensland boys, and run up the steps with the flag.
At Government House.
Yeah, Government House. And I said, "Oh, okay then." So I gets up on one of them pillars, and I'm sitting up top, and I see my chance to run to the steps, but I looked behind, nobody behind. So it was too late. I jumped. And I ran, and these cops come running over. And if you ever watched that on TV, the Parliament House fence was going like this. The boys were saying, "Leave her alone." They were calling out to Pat O'Shane, but they were rocking the fence. I thought the fence would break because they heard the coppers say to the other one, "Just break her arm and throw her in the bull wagon." I thought, "Oh, here we go."
But they didn't.
No, and I went out of town, so I marched back in, went the side way, and up the side of Parliament House, this man was painting, and he had his plank there, And I went like a snake. I went up there and in there, and I got in, and then no one else was there to get the other side of the flag. So I went out to the balcony to drop. I was supposed to drop the flag on her, but I dropped it and it just went down. But you know, from this day, I don't know how I got out of that building. I know how I got in. Yeah. I must have ran out the back door or something. But it was that one.
You were extraordinarily brave. So we were
Minister.
talking about in the car today that Auntie Di said, a lot of people say that I'm resilient.
Yes.
And we were talking, and I said, well, that's because you've survived such an extraordinary, amazing life. And she said, oh, but I think I'm a survivor. I said, well, survivor has a sort of a term of the victim about it, but I don't think the word victim ever sits with you, Auntie Di. You are incredibly resilient. This is an extraordinary book. Her life is highs and lows and everything you could possibly want in a wonderful memoir. So thank you very much, Auntie Di. And I could thank you.
So we've got some questions. Has anybody got questions for Auntie Di? There's just there.
I love questions.
The green button on. Keep it pressed till the green light comes on there.
Still red. It's an amazing story. But I wondered if you'd ever actually thought of taking legal action to sue the government for being, basically you were being imprisoned for being raped and then you were terribly treated. Have you ever thought of launching some kind of class action to get damages?
My son put in a claim in something survival. I don't know, but the last word was survival. So he got contact with a solicitor, and a solicitor did look at it, but that one they're looking at was more for the rape of the girls in Parramatta Girls' Home. So I don't think I'd get anything out of it anyway. But yeah, as I was talking yesterday in the crowd, my son was sitting up the back, and he has a solicitor that said to him, I didn't know your mother had been in so many institutions, so she needs to talk to me about what you just said. So maybe I'll put it in for the kids. Yeah. Because there was so much. And there was lies. Well, I've got 6 children, 35 grandchildren, and 60 great.
That's amazing. Anyone else? Question? Yes.
Thank you. It's a wonderful story of survival. Your kids are doing okay, and your grandkids?
Oh yeah, my kids. My first daughter's passed. She died in a car accident, and my second daughter, she's got 4 children, and they're all working, and they're all doing the good stuff. Naughty boys. And Kevin, he's passed. Philip, he's got 12 kids. And all the kids work in McDonald's and all, like Kmart's and stuff. And he lives in Maitland. And then David, he's the leadership program, and he does he looks for men to work for. Like the leadership program is a program for men coming out of jail, and then he puts them into work. They get counselling, they get referred on to other things. He's looking for people to help him because he does landscape gardening and he's jack of all trades. So he's been through courses because David's had it hard. And
Debbie's kids, Christopher,
they all own their own homes. Debbie's kids own their own homes. Linda's kids own their own homes.
Another great success story, you've
Yeah,
a
yeah.
wonderful family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've asked my children to write the kids of Dianne, the survivors of Dianne O'Brien. So, because they went through trauma. If I went through it and I had the first 4, they went through it.
There's a lot of stuff that we haven't discussed here that's clearly in the book, but those very early years when the children had, I think, 5 different dads?
Oh, well, two. I had, the first one was the rape. The second one was my boyfriend from kid. And the 1, 2, 3, the last 3 were to one person, and then 1, 2. I had a man that never hit me, and the man that never hit me, I couldn't handle. Because I thought, because I grew up so violent and people used to flog me and that, I thought that was the way it goes. You know, oh, well, you got to shut up because he's going to hit you, rah, rah. So when I used to pick a fight with this fella, he'd hit the wall and go away. And my uncle said one day, why don't you hit her? That's what she's looking for, because she's been bashed so many times. And he said, no way, I'd never hit her. He said all that hate and anger would come out and she'd kill me. I never hit her. So no, he never. And he was a good person, but I just couldn't understand why he was so good. His first pay packet he gave me, I threw in the fire. Because I didn't understand, you know. I thought,
no one had actually shown you love and joy, what we would normally expect. But all that extraordinary resilience that you have, we haven't even touched on in the letter and the good work that you do there.
Yeah.
Do we have
It's
time?
all in the book, though, isn't it?
It's all in the book.
It's all in the book.
in the book.
Yeah. It's all in the book. I guess we don't have
That
very
went
much time.
fast.
And maybe one more question right at the back.
Can I just ask you, what was the catalyst for you finally writing the story, and what did the process of writing?
We had a book, a ghostwriter, Sue Williams, and she's absolutely fabulous now. She's set the book out. But they're all my diaries. So when I decided to put my diaries into a book, it was for my kids. Because, like I say, it was only me, and then there was nothing behind me, and these were my kids. So I wanted them to have something else behind, you know, cousins or aunties, uncles, or somebody, because my kids grew up with no nannies and pops and things like that. So I was the main person, so I wanted it to be wider. So doing the diaries and then putting it into a book, then it was for my kids. But one of my sons said, oh, Mum, you put it out there in a book. And I said, oh, well, we can't help it now, it's gone around the world. So too late to whinge about it. But I just wanted that. So they were all my diaries, and I still write diaries because my first ones that Dad burnt, they were all burnt. He burnt everything of mine before I went to the home. Yeah. Thank you.
And I think there was actually one hand down there. No? It was me, but it was the same question. Oh, same question.
Yeah, I was waiting for that question.
Yeah. I think that Di and Annie Di and Benny, of course, deserve a big round of applause, and I'm sure you're all very motivated.